in northern Uganda for the last 12 years now, working in a post-war area of northern Uganda following the LRA warfare, which probably most people have heard of, the Joseph Kony dictator war, which was very, very horrific guerrilla warfare that lasted for over 20 years. My background is I'm third generation family, American born, but working in nations and missions and medical, from China to the Philippines to now myself being in Africa. So this was not too much of a huge transition for me as I settled in northern Uganda during the war. I was working in the south and with a project of adult education, literacy, at a training campus right on Lake Victoria. I worked there for about a year, and then I found out about the war in northern Uganda going on. At that time it had still been kind of undercover. It wasn't completely discovered yet, but I found that a lot of organizations and NGOs, charity groups, mission groups had been evacuated by the different embassies in different nations, particularly Western workers, due to the incredible danger. About 1,000 people a day were dying, and almost 50,000 children had been abducted. So that's where my heart was. I'm a nurse, but my heart is with hurting people and suffering, and I wanted to identify with people's stories and pain and where they had walked, and I'd always prayed, God, send me anywhere else in the world where no one else wants to go to do what needs to be done the most. So I found that that was the area. So I started north over the Nile River, kind of on my own. I notified the embassy I was going, and I went. There was so much to do, you just think, where do you begin? You could have done education, medical, food, charity, literacy, everything's needed. And that was prior to the war actually being discovered. And when it was, by the Invisible Children, about a year and a half after I was up there, that went to the LA Times and then the New York Dateline. It was on the news, and the UN said when they came and walked the area that it was one of the most horrific atrocities they had seen since Hitler. So that was the exposure of it. I had been up there for about a year and a half by that time and settled in the town of Gulu. There's about 150 camps surrounding that area with almost 2 million people in these IDP camps, with a lot of malnutrition, ambushes, massacres daily, and all kinds of things going on. And of course all that has already been exposed more than 10 years ago. But I just kind of dove in. We started really just praying for the area, praying for the war to stop. African Acholi people began moving in with me in my little home in Gulu. And we started, actually I started alone with them, but I started by trying to discover what their desires were, their interests were. And that's how the whole Favor of God and then later Favor Africa ministry started, our NGO started, our charity work, our village resettlement, child education, medical outreaches, and all kinds of other programs which I will touch on. But it started in the heart of the people. It didn't start as a Western organization. It started with one person after another in this war-torn area coming to me and saying, I have a dream. I want to work with children, or I want to do feeding, or I want to do something to reach my people. I want to do something to help. So I began sitting with them one by one to see, what are your interests, what are your desires, what are your skills. And there had been almost no education in 20 years, because when you have that kind of a war with that intensity, it just chops 20 years of development out of society. So we were still seeing about 1,000 deaths a day during that time. I went in and out of the IDP camps at my own risk. missed ambushes several times by a few minutes. But I had such a heart for the people, an overwhelming love for the Acholi people and others that, you know, were living there in the north too. So we started with the children's home first. World Vision had come to us and said, you know, we have trauma rehabilitation for post-war victims, soldiers, and rescued children on the bodies of dead parents, but we don't have long-term facilities in place yet. Would you be willing to consider long-term care for some of these child-headed huts? So we began getting children from referrals that way. We started in the little house I was renting in. We just cleaned out a bedroom and said, sure, if I'm sleeping here, they can sleep here too. So the first 4 siblings we got were 4 beautiful little girls. They were 10, 8, 6, and a baby when their mom died. Their dad was killed in the war. And by the time I got them 2 years later, they were 12, 10, 8, and about a 2-year-old who had never walked, never spoken a word, and we thought she was deaf and dumb, but realized just severely malnourished with several other diseases, and which we treated right away. So these 4 little girls had stayed alive in this child-headed hut by collecting sticks and grass, making brooms, selling them in the market, getting a few coins, and buying their next meal. So it was an honor to just have them join the house, which we called our mission house at that time. It was just growing with people coming and moving in and sleeping everywhere during the war. And one room was cleared out for these 4 little girls. So they just became part of the family. And the vision grew for these kind of orphans. There were other needs for ex-soldiers that were being rescued. Later, many of them came and joined our staff, and we took them through rehabilitation, vocational training, all kinds of counseling, and they are normal functioning adults today at all different levels of, you know, in society and in the community. And it's awesome to see the transformation in lives. Is it possible? Yes. And if through prayer and love and counseling and help, people can turn their lives around to make a difference, being pulled from nothing but a war-torn generation and a war-torn land, but now see healing and productivity, families restored, villages rebuilt. It is a vision come true. So we soon saw the end of the war through a lot of prayer. Then as these people started coming and the Acholi people started moving in with me, from the children's home came the adult training center, which was the Bible school. Then we started trauma rehabilitation. A doctor from Australia came and found me in Gulu. He had written the post-war traumatization programs for World Vision, Samaritan's Purse, and several of the other War Child and other agencies up there in northern Uganda. And when he found me there in the ground, he said, so you're this crazy white lady over here that I hear about. And he said, I've written a program based on peace and reconciliation, which lay people can teach, but the heart of it is forgiveness. And it's the only thing that he's found and others have found as we began implementing it that has brought such a change in people's hearts. Because people cannot be productive to dream again and work again and do things again until they've had some emotional healing. So he wrote the program and he came to us and he said, hey, would you guys implement this? So he brought a team of 12 from Australia. He wrote the curriculum, we translated it in Acholi, and we said, yeah, we'll do it. So we got 12 in that department. I trained them up. And during all this time, I'm mostly doing leadership development. I'm just, bringing them in, training them, envisioning them, empowering them, send them out to do what you dream of. And we kind of all brought it under the umbrella then of the NGO that we have registered, which was Favor of God Ministries there. It is in South Sudan now as Favor Africa. But we started this trauma rehabilitation program and we put it on the radio in camp after camp, village after village. This is for anybody with nightmares, with fears, with anger, with unforgiveness, with, just this revenge kind of attitude, which is the root of a lot of tribalism and bloodshed that still continues in some of these places. So people would just come from out of the woodwork, from teenagers to widows to village leaders to chiefs and, we call them LC, but village captains and so forth. So everybody attended, and we've seen 36,000 plus people come through the program with incredible results. For forgiveness in the midst of war that was still going on, and changed lives, changed hearts, creativity coming back to people, motivation to work again, beginning to dream again. And this is going on like second and third level now in their leadership as they've been running with this vision. So that was effective. Then we started other things as people came. One person had a vision for education, so we started our primary school, which now I can say, thanks to the team on the ground, which is all a Chole, they've done phenomenal. We have one of the best schools academically in Gulu now. We have had honors, awards, recognition from the government level. And so it's a primary school with about 300 children. And it's excellent academics, as well as character building foundations, which a lot of times those are missing, especially post-war. When you talk about work ethics, and you talk about creative learning, and you talk about cognitive thinking, and accelerated learning, and all those things, as well as values and character and things that sometimes we take for granted in our own lives. They may be missing in some of the post-war and developing areas. So we're just really thankful and real proud to say that those are part of this whole education system. We strongly believe in education. If you've studied transforming worldviews, Singapore was a nation that went from what we call third world or developing country to first world in one generation, and they did it through their education system. So shaping the heart, the mind, the values of a child within the context of African setting and their village and their clan and their culture, and keeping it that way, not trying to go in and change that, because there's beautiful things within every culture, but educating them within that to become the next leaders of Uganda. That's been our goal, and we've seen incredible fruitfulness in that. So one thing after another just continued developing. We began a clinic in town where we did mobile medical clinics to bush and rural areas that had no clinics at all, for first aid, malaria, simple treatment, tropical wounds, health and nutrition, clean water, that kind of thing. Began liaisoning a lot with other organizations, working with water filters within the Rotary Club, well digging organizations, and nutrition and food programs and liaisoning. So we're great networkers since we live up there, and love the people, and it's kind of become home, or it has become home. So after the medical and the school, then trauma rehab, we began reaching into the prisons. We saw a huge need in the prisons for vocational, for leadership development, for literacy, in the men's prison and the women's prison, both. And in northern Uganda, I'm not sure if it's typical throughout all Africa, but when the women are in prison, they come with their small children. So there's a real need for training in that area and mothering while they're in prison themselves. Physical needs of diapers, milk, personal hygiene, and many other things. So we began providing those, as well as we put in a library. We brought in musical instruments so they could have, creativity and fun time. Sewing machines. Every Christmas we'd give them a cow. That was the time they got meat for the year. So began a lot of prison outreaches on a twice-a-week basis, which has continued, and we've seen tremendous fruitfulness where there's no halfway houses when people get out of prison. So many of the workers and the prisoners that we had worked with within the prison for several years, when they get released, became productive citizens in society or in the community almost immediately because of the fruit of that work. So then we started government dinners, And that was done monthly first, and then quarterly, where we would reach out to the police, the government leaders, the government officials in the town of Gulu, as well as other areas, serve them a nice meal, do leadership training. We really wanted to see lasting transformation in an area, and that is by bringing integrity and simple things like do unto others as you would have them do unto you, honesty, truthfulness, business mind, literacy. We distributed Bibles, many other reading books and curriculum resources that they needed, and we'd just serve them a wonderful, wonderful meal and have times of sharing and fellowship. We began doing that with the churches. We began doing it with the police department, the government leaders in that area, which is throughout northern Uganda, and began seeing tremendous fruitfulness for that in that too. Now, one of our strong visions is village resettlement. We began those projects also post-war. I say we. Again, I'm referring to the incredible, awesome Acholi team that I work with, which grew to about 75 people quite rapidly, full-time, and without having a lot of funding or government agencies behind us, although we liaison with all of them. We look back and say we're not really sure how everything was supported. I think there was a lot of faith, a lot of zeal, and a lot of excitement and enthusiasm in what was happening and what we saw being transformed under the hearts and the hands of very, very zealous people that have a very strong faith. So we started village resettlement projects, have some pilot project there that has been very effective. For example, targeting a village that was really, really hit hard during the war by the LRA, lots and lots and lots of slaughtering and loss, and of course every form of house or dwelling that used to be there is not there anymore. So besides rebuilding a home and a house and a farm and a village post-war, as people left the IDP camps and began resettling, there's a lot of things involved in that. The wells have covered in with dirt or caved in, so we'd liaison with a well digging person, and then we'd find brick making machines. Somebody else loved, providing brick making, so we try to connect the dots and say, okay, can you bring in some machines? We got another village here. Somebody else said, I'll do the iron sheets on the roof, and we're going to build a community house. They can use it for vocational, youth activities, widows projects, kids clubs, church on Sunday, and it became like a community center. And then we put in a well next to it, and then an income generating project. So anything like cows, pigs, goats, chickens, farming. One of the projects, for example, with the cows was getting 2 oxen and a plow and saying, okay, in this village where we put in a community center and a well and so forth, we're going to see a co-op formed of 10 families. So we get the 2 oxen and the plow, and they work together to build a little corral and shelter for it. And then it would go from one family a day to the next, to the next, to the next, over 5 days, maybe rest on the weekend or rest one day, and then just keep on going like that. So every family had it a day. And as their farms could be rebuilt faster that way, then they were able to get a milk cow, do the same thing, kind of share it, until they began multiplying. We're going back and following the results of all of this very, very carefully and seeing multiplication, effectiveness, and village resettlement happen quite quickly because it's being done as teamwork. So since we've seen models in these things, we know they can be replicated quite quickly. We've seen a lot of success and progress in northern Uganda, a lot of prayer, a lot of adult education. We've helped community kids with school fees, widows with food, and so our community center is serving people on a daily basis. House of Prayer is going on in one direction, but all these other community projects are still very active. We get teams from the West that want to come in and do a mobile medical outreach, so we are on the ground and we make those things happen finding the poorest areas rurally. Then we put in a radio this year, and the radio is reaching most of northern Uganda. We also have the frequency and the license to open one in Juba, South Sudan, and we're ready to get it built as soon as we get enough partners and funds to get it up on the air. But it's a 3 kilowatt, so it'll go from border to border in South Sudan. And now in Uganda, our radio is also excellent, one of the top in the north. We're going to be adding programs such as health and nutrition, disease prevention, maternal baby care, clean water, and then family programs, peace and reconciliation, also small business projects for income generating. So it's an incredible tool because not everybody deep village rurally has internet access or technology or even electricity, but everybody's got a radio. So you can go to the deepest village and find that, oh, we heard you on the radio. And it's amazing what they remember. So this is an incredible tool. We want to continue using it and taking advantage of education and many things to envision and empower communities through radio programs as we advance in that area. So that's kind of been our 10-year history in northern Uganda, and very, very fruitful, very exciting, very fulfilling. I've started going in and out of South Sudan now for the last 4 or 5 years, even pre-referendum, and then during the referendum since then, also holding government breakfasts in different areas. I've been in about 5 out of the 6 states, where we're bringing together the local chiefs, the governor, the vice, the mayors, the politicians, the MPs, the commissioners, and other people in leadership, directors of NGOs and so forth. We serve them a big meal and talk about national transformation. And we do a teaching based on that, and then talk about the village resettlement, community development, and our goal strategically now is to bring about 5 men or women together from each of the 10 states in South Sudan, and bring these 50 together in a local place right outside of Juba, hopefully beginning this by January 2015, and equipping them and training them for about 5 or 6 months, and then sending them back to their 50 prospective places with some of the same models of education, adult education and literacy, village resettlement, brick making, connecting to iron sheets, connecting to income generating projects and that kind of thing. So we plan that by the beginning of 2015. Of course, we need a lot of help doing that. And we're very, very good networkers, like I said. I live over there, that's my home, so I can connect dots easily, oversee projects. We want to see the radio built and on the air in South Sudan this year. It's our goal, it's a good goal. And duplicating some of the education systems that we've seen very, very effective in northern Uganda. The education is really, really what's going to bring a huge change in national transformation, in peace, long-term income sustainability. So many problems come from poor education or lack of education. And as I go into the field with the different tribes, very, very, very rurally, cattle raiders, cattle ranchers, others are fisher, live, for fishing, make a livelihood, a few farming, and I'm talking about the areas of South Sudan, even during this last war. The need for education is massive. They've had 55 years of consecutive guerrilla warfare, the longest in the history of the world. So, will some of these wars and fighting come to an end? We really believe so. We believe when you move enough good in, and development, and peace, and brotherly love, and treating one another with respect and value by by educating people, by giving them dreams again, and sharing, and a lot of respect, rurally as well as urban. It's transformation to a nation, and value systems. So we see that a lack of education has led to a lot of things, which I've been hearing this from the governors themselves, so I'm repeating their words, about 5 governors that I've had meals with in South Sudan, that the lack of education has led to immense poverty, a lot of war, particularly tribal wars, corruption, polygamy, witchcraft, just a lack of development. All those things tie into not having good, solid education available. So that is really what we're going to be targeting. We want to see not only the primary level education systems put in, but go on up to secondary. With that involves obviously training teachers, because there's not been a lot of good training available. So we're liaisoning with other organizations and seeing a teacher's training, college, university, built and developed particularly in Gulu. We'd like to see that also replicated in South Sudan, where things like accelerated learning, cognitive thinking, practical application, core values, creativity, self-motivation, respect, all of those kind of things are incorporated into that kind of an education system, but it's kept within the laws of that government and very contextualized to African settings. It's one thing to take Western textbooks in and say things about going down to the store, in 2nd grade, reading primers about, little Johnny going to the store and buying an ice cream cone. A Sudanese child doesn't relate to that. Maybe going to the village market and buying a chicken, makes more sense. So when we talk about contextualizing things for Africa, that's very, very important, that they can take ownership and grab hold of a whole education system that's going to change their families first and then their communities. As they see the value of that, then of course that's very contagious, and they begin running with vision themselves when they see it changing and affecting their own children. So we want to serve them and find out village by village. When we go into new areas, we don't just kind of lord it over and come in to say, this is our vision. As a staff, we never do that. We say we're here to serve and to impart vision, never to impose. And how can we serve you? What are your greatest needs? What is it you are interested in the most? And we hear from them. We're here to it's their land, and we're here to do whatever we can to see them achieve their goals, their dreams, their visions. And in doing that, I can say it's the most fulfilling and rewarding thing that I have ever done in my life, and seeing people's lives change because you become a part of them. You walk every day with them, you walk beside them, you cry with them, you laugh with them, you make mistakes together. But there's an aspect of mentoring that's involved. It's not just giving a fish, it's teaching people how to fish. And that takes getting in their boat with them and living in their villages and walking in their shoes and seeing things from their perspective and their eyes. Because we're not always right. And in fact, maybe wrong more than we are right. But we have just as much to learn from one another in cultures and in nations as they might want to learn from us. So it's always a two-way street. And we remember why we're there. And so we're seeing change, we're seeing progress, we're seeing transformation. It's very, very exciting. We do need a lot of help to make this happen. Just like they say, it takes a whole village to raise a child. It takes a whole community in America really to raise a child, from school teachers to the government, to the church, to the family, to the job and the working world, and so on. It's the same there. So we do need all hands on deck. We have a fabulous administrative system in place, policies and procedures, audits, accountability, checks and balances. We teach integrity. and remodel integrity. We have a board of directors in the U.S., registered as a 501c3 nonprofit here. We have a board of directors in Uganda, and this is obviously tax-exempt charity work. To be able to reach us, we have a U.S. address, post office box in Houston, which is box 691-633, Houston, Texas, 77269. Also, our website is www.favorofgod.org, and we are also opening another website called Favor Africa, and that will focus on most of the charity work and humanitarian projects, village development, education, and so forth that I have just now talked about, which we will be extending into South Sudan, already registered in that nation, already have a Sudanese team on the ground as I speak, and already moving forward with a lot of these projects. So if you're aware of anybody that does grant writing or foundations and grants and wants to participate with some of the larger ones, we do have a good track record behind us. We have a huge vision ahead of us, and we invite you to join us and to partner in, because it's going to take all hands on deck to get it done. Thank you.